excited to dive into these. I'll start with the first one, and this one might be a little counterintuitive, but turns out newsletters are not dead. They've
Yeah,
started
there's
with the daily
75 million
newsletter.
reasons that
I know,
reinforce.
right? Four 4 million reasons, 75 million other reasons
Yeah.
why newsletters are still alive. So they started with the daily, which was, I believe, every 6 a.m. every day, like you get a digest of the news. They've now sort of expanded out to different newsletter franchises. You mentioned a 40% open rate, which, at that scale is incredibly impressive. But the sort of takeaway I think here for marketers is that email is not dead. Email is still like this precious space within the obviously the work flow of our audience, but it is a place where we interact with content. It's a place where brands can get a ton of engagement off of your content. I was listening to an interview with Alex, and he talked about this idea of an audience funnel where it goes from rented to owned to monetized, and really continuing to use social, use some of these other channels to amplify our content on rented land, but to try to drive a subscriber into the owned sort of category. And that is the email address. Ultimately, that's the currency that Morning Brew has done a great job of optimizing. But this is something B2B companies need to think about. It's not that we haven't been driving opt-ins to our marketable database using Marketo or HubSpot or whatever. Like, this isn't like a strategy that's brand new, but the language I think is, and I think this taxonomy really shifts the minds of the marketer, because what we're actually trying to do is to build subscribers, and that is much more of a personal thing than an opt-in in a marketable database. But building a subscriber audience that we want to engage and kind of nurture them into becoming members of our true community. I think Morning Brew has done such a great job, and they started with a newsletter.
When your intention is, we want to capture MQLs from this piece of content, you approach the creation of that content in a completely different way than when you're thinking, I want the reaction, the response to this content to be, I want to subscribe for more of this stuff because this is so good. I want to get more of this. The intent is, we want you to come to our playground because we've got a lot more where this came from. And I think when you think about that differently, you put a lot more effort into what you're actually putting out in the world.
Yeah. James, that's such an important insight, because we're so used to your point, scoring leads as they come into the database, which again, no harm in that, but effectively just automating. Like, we talk about marketing automation. We're like automating this idea of human connection and trust and relationship. And for too long, that has been in the service of leads and MQLs. And I think that this is a big shift. It's actually thinking about this through the lens of thought leadership, value delivery, and making truly this relationship and trust building motion. And man, if brands that are doing this right in B2B are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of the competition.
Yeah. So the other takeaway for me, AK, is that as I see them rolling out more and more content franchises, their content creation is hyper focused on a very specific persona. So it's a little bit more broad. When they got their start, Morning Brew, it was business content. But now I'm starting to see Instagram ads for CFO Brew, for marketing Brew. And so they're tightening up their persona for who the content is for. And so with under this overarching umbrella of the modern business leader kind of psychotype. So, verticalized content, retail brew, emerging tech brew. They've got one called Sidekick. It's more lifestyle. So I think the way they're going here, I see, in the work we do, producing shows for B2B brands, you see a lot of folks that want to go, they want to be for everybody. But I think the lesson here for B2B brands is to really try, like, don't think about your media strategy like you only get one shot at it. You only get one content franchise. I think when you think about it like, oh, could we build a content franchise for this particular sector of our potential customer base that is, all they focus on is this one thing inside of IT. Yes, let's do that. That's my takeaway there. they've created multiple content franchises that are focused on different verticals, and I think it's going to allow them to dominate the business content landscape for years to come.
Totally. You guys are the experts at this at Sweetfish, man. So I mean, I know you've seen a lot of companies that are adopting kind of similar strategies.
Yeah.
So much wisdom there. The third one is one that I was sort of, my eyes opened up quite a bit to this. It's the idea of cross promoting as a function of building your audience. And you mentioned Audience Plus. We're going through this now of like building our audience from scratch. And I appreciated some of their early days of, as you mentioned, kind of passing around a sign-up sheet at University of Michigan to drive subscribers. But obviously, as they grew, finding ways to basically partner with companies who have access already to that audience that you want to gain access into. And they talked about doing newsletter swaps, which was something that I'm still wrapping my head around a little bit, but the idea of saying, hey, let's do a partnership, a content partnership effectively where we're cross-promoting into each other's audiences, and as such, building our subscribers along the way.
Yep.
Second is actually Alex, as sort of obviously as the founder, CEO, appearing on podcasts. So him going on other people's podcasts and sort of like an influencer play, but effectively by doing so, he's driving more awareness of Morning Brew, and through that, indirectly, more folks are signing up through the through that kind of referral. And then I know we've talked about influencer marketing before, but just the power of leveraging on either a paid basis, or somehow organically other influencers who are fans and who they have their own audiences. Just this idea, like building an audience is not all about just deplatforming your audience from social. It's an important part of it, and it's not just about paid in terms of paid ads. Social is not the be-all end-all. Cross promotion, I think, is a super interesting and important strategy for audience building.
Being in the land of podcasting, episode drops are another fantastic way to do cross promotion. You even see folks like Wondery doing this with their own shows. So when Wondery drops a new show in their network, they're cross promoting that show by dropping an entire episode into the RSS feed of another show. So obviously, millions of people subscribe to Serial, for example. Well, Serial, I think with the stuff that's gone on with the subject of their first season of Serial, there's been some updates there, and so they've put out some new content recently. But for a long time, like those were just a lot of subscribers to a show that wasn't producing new content, but using that platform to then promote other shows. It's like, hey, if you like Serial, you're probably going to like this other true crime podcast that we just dropped. And so getting thoughtful with doing episode drops, I think, is another fantastic way, not just with external shows. Obviously that's a no-brainer. Like you're going to look at other shows where it's like, hey, you're reaching the same audience, but and maybe even and being willing to pay for that. Like it doesn't have to be like an organic unpaid, we like that. That's something to consider. But then your own shows, as you're building out your own media strategy and you're thinking about different content franchises that you're building, for sure you want to do that across your own content franchises. So I am a huge fan of cross promotion, and I think Morning Brew is doing a fantastic job of it, and B2B brands need to be looking at that.